What's the word, everybody? Welcome into a new episode of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. You know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Shout out to Toyota. We love the sponsor and you guys repping us for sure on the By the Horns podcast. I'm Cam Smith. You know who I'm riding with. He is none other than Drew Stevens of the Bigs. Drew, we catching everybody up because I know it's holiday season. People out there shopping and looking for Turbo Man dolls. Like if you're a fan of the movie Jingle All the Way. See, Drew's a fan. Drew's a fan. There we go. All right.
The Christmas movie right there.
There we go, man. Underrated for sure, man. If you can't find a Turbo Man doll, then you can get Booster, his trusty sidekick, but don't nobody want no Booster, man.
Nobody want no Booster.
At all, man. So it's the holiday, it's joyful, it's festive, all those different things. And the Bulls are bringing some joy in some ways. Maybe some people like it, some people don't, but I'm just a fan of wins. And so they stacked up a couple of wins recently, Drew. When you go back to last Friday against the Charlotte Hornets inside of the United Center, I was doing the pre and post for Bulls Countdown Live with my man Kendall Gill, just talking about all the good things that the Bulls brought that night. I mean, so many people stepped up without Nikola Jokic, who was out with an illness, but I mean, other guys for sure did the thing, like Josh Giddey, Lonzo Ball. I mean, it was a lot of guys that really took advantage of their minutes. Patrick Williams, first time we saw him in nearly a month, Drew, made his return against the Charlotte Hornets. Stat line didn't look good. Legs looked a little weak. Obviously, still working on his way back from that foot injury that the Bulls were bringing him back along cautiously with. But then you fast forward after that win, you get Vooch back on Monday night in the 6th in Toronto. And Bulls were playing around with their food, and it got real for him a little bit towards the end of the fourth quarter. But the basketball guys, blessed, it was Lonzo Ball, man. Lonzo stepped up, had himself a nice game despite shooting the ball tough in the first half. And the Bulls, that was their second win against the Toronto Raptors. So that brings us to where we are as we record this. It is December 17th. And again, some people might be listening to this while they're getting their holiday runs in, toy shopping, all those different things. But Drew, just shine some light on what you've seen from this Bulls team in their last two matchups.
Just a team that's taking advantage of the situations that were presented to them. Two of the teams in the Charlotte Hornets and the Toronto Raptors who are behind them in terms of the standings league-wide. Obviously, Scotty Barnes was out for the Raptors. You had a few guys injured for the Hornets, including LaMelo Ball, who had been playing some outstanding basketball to this point in the season. He now is, supposed to come back, but obviously wasn't there for that game. And the Bulls, right, they took advantage of it. They're beating up on teams that I guess you want them to, but they're also kind of playing a little bit of a dangerous game, which we can get into a little bit later. But to your point, especially Monday night with the bench with THT playing well.
Ooh, man, that north side got to it.
Hey,
that north side got to it, Drew.
I was telling Eugene earlier today, I didn't know THT had it in him. He caught that lob from Lonzo and
yeah.
I said, I'm sorry, THT. I was not familiar with your game.
I'm right there with you, man. Even Lonzo said post-game after that he was shocked that THT reverse dunked it. Like, I've seen THT. We've both seen THT really since the Simeon days, man, and how he came up through that program and was like the next up-and-coming dude, and he was. And to carry on that Simeon lineage to the NBA. But when you heard Drew say Eugene, that's Eugene McIntosh of the Bigs, our guy. We're going to have Gene on at some point on the By the Horns podcast. But look, because Gene's going to give it to you straight, no chaser. And that's just what he does. Has that basketball background and pedigree. Mount Carmel graduate over there, played with Antoine Walker, one of the legends out of Chicago, for sure. A legend on a few different levels: high school, national champion at Kentucky, and NBA champion with the Miami Heat. So Gene knows what he's talking about with basketball. So we gotta have Gene on, man. But we have to maybe run that by Toyota and everybody, because Gene, like I said, will give it to you straight, no filter. You can't filter Gene at all. I mean, straight no chaser, but you can't filter Gene at all.
Not at all. But no, in addition to THT, it was good to see Lonzo out there. He played a little bit above his 20-minute restriction limit.
Yeah.
Saw him close the game, had a tough shooting night. I think he went 2 of 9, 2 of 10.
2 of 8, yeah, 2 of 8 from 3, yep.
But he hit a huge three late in that game that extended the lead up to 6. Toronto did kind of come back, cut it to 3, I think, at one point. They traded buckets, traded baskets. But THT came back, split his free throws late in the game, and ended up kind of salting the game away. Somebody from Toronto hit a three late in the clock.
Jamal Shed. And I know that's PTSD. That's a PTSD name for people that had the spread on that game, because Jamal Shed's three cooked a lot of bettors, man, and they got hooked on that, because I believe the spread was 1.5. I want to say on that in that matchup, or might have been 2.5 with that one. So yeah, Jamal Shed for sure. Cooked a lot of bets. So sorry to you out there that were victim of that.
Yeah, but no,
the 1.5 spread.
the Bulls are, it's good to see to this point in the season. Zach and Vooch play the way they have. Zoe look like he hasn't lost a step.
Yeah. But
they're playing a dangerous game, and we talked about how the month of December looked like it would be one of those months where they can kind of get some wins, but at what expense? They've won 4 of their first 6 games this month. Of course, those 4 wins have come against the Nets, the Raptors, the Charlotte Hornets, and I'm missing one team, the Wizards, I believe. So you're talking about 4 wins coming against teams that are in a different race, who, if they haven't taken their foot fully off the pedal, are starting to ease up just a little bit in one shape, form, fashion, or another. And at some point, something's got to give with the Bulls too, because they're, again, you want guys to get some experience. You had to kind of showcase these veterans on this team. They've done that. They can't play any better than they already have. And at this point, you're kind of stacking wins at the expense of the value of your own draft pick. So I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know if, a deal will come around for somebody on this roster or some people on this roster. I don't know. I don't know if the Bulls going to have to play a player participation game where they kind of hold guys out here and there. But something's going to have to give.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll keep our eyes on that thing. So to go back to those wins for the Wolves for the first 6, as you mentioned, they got the win. When you look at it against the Brooklyn Nets, that's how they started the month of December. They followed that up with a win against San Antonio, Ayo Dosunmu, and that's when you go back to the Brooklyn name, triple-double for Josh Giddey. That next game in San Antonio, Ayo's first triple-double as an NBA player, dropped a couple of games against Indiana and Philly. We touched on that just a little bit. We don't have to go into those games, but they followed it up, as we mentioned, with back-to-back wins against the Hornets and the Raptors. And that Raptors win also, when we think about Nikola Vucevic being back for that team, game-high 24 points for himself. But that was without Zach LaVine as well in that ball game. So Zach out, I believe it was low back tightness that he was dealing with for himself. So it's good to see other guys stepped up. And you mentioned Taylor Horton-Tucker, the 15 points that he scored. It was 15 of the bench's 30 points that they scored against the Toronto Raptors. And no Scotty Barnes. And let's just be real about this. Toronto's not a good ball club, right? I mean, they're not a team, and this is no shot at head coach Darko Rajakovic, who is a good coach, in my opinion. But with the makeup of this team, how they're bringing guys up, obviously they're dealing with some injuries. You put them in the category of a Washington Wizards, a Charlotte Hornets when you think of the Eastern Conference. I'm not going to even put them in the category of Detroit, because Detroit is a tougher team than what people are seeing out there. And they definitely have some talent that go out and play. And I think they're on a different trajectory than the Raptors, and for damn sure the Washington Wizards. But those are for this Bulls team, for guys to step up, like a THT, like Alonzo off the bench as well. Jalen Smith is another dude that scored in double figures for this Bulls group off the bench. And we saw him really have a ball game against the Charlotte Hornets as well with that double-double last Friday in place of Nikola Vucevic. But to what you were saying, Drew, you still want to get one of these lottery picks and try to be not only in the lottery, but the top 5, maybe top 3, maybe the number 1 overall pick of the Chicago Bulls. But that's the interesting dynamic. And I'm not going to say challenge, but just moving forward, what the plan is for this team, for this franchise with the rest of this season. And so you hinted towards some players on this roster, being discussed as trade pieces moving forward, because we are past December 15th and that trade window is open in the NBA. it just depends on how you can make that money work when it comes to these contracts. And so speaking of that, Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic for sure are guys that I'm sure a lot of teams are keeping their eyes on, along with Lonzo Ball and Ayo Dosunmu. There are a lot of pieces on the table for the Bulls that can be moved. But going back to Zach LaVine, Drew, you hit us in the group text that we got, me, you, and our guy Edgar Perez, our producer for the By the Horns podcast, and he produces all of the CHSN podcasts. So get the air horn. Edgar, we don't have one, so I just do a fake one. Pew, 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 pew. Shout out to our guy, Edgar Perez, always doing great work. But you sent us a nice tweet that involved the Athletic and a specific name with the Chicago Bulls being involved to a NBA championship team.
Yeah. Before I get into that, let me correct something I said earlier. I said that the Bulls had beaten the Wizards, and that was one of their 4 wins. It's actually the Spurs.
Right.
Though they do have another game against the Spurs and 2 more against the Wizards this month, just to kind of show you kind of what lies ahead with this team. But in regard to Zach LaVine, about an hour ago, we got a report from The Athletic that in addition to Jordan Poole, Jordan Clarkson, DeAndre Hunter, and Jonas Valanciunas, the Denver Nuggets are having conversations about trading for one Zach LaVine. It is said that league sources say the focus on LaVine in recent discussions is significant. So, we've kind of been talking about this since the summer, kind of even before that, like going back to last season, about, what level of interest teams would have in Zach, not just as a player, but can they stomach taking on that contract with their own cap sheets? So now we have our first kind of like foot on the ground when it comes to the Bulls maybe being able to unload that contract and get Zach LaVine to a different team. My initial reaction to that was, man, Zach gets to go from playing with the Bulls, who we know at best are like a perennial play-in team, to potentially going to a championship contender and playing with the best player in the league and Nikola Jokic. Is like,
oh, Drew, you starting something with that best player in the league, Nikola Jokic. Now, you're not gonna get no pushback from me. Now, I don't want to take this conversation and go left and open up Pandora's box with that one, but you're gonna have some people hit you in your mentions, and we don't mind the smoke on By the Horn. Like we respond to people, if people that are being logic, some people just be trolling and all that stuff. But, we see all that stuff. So that's a conversation that will be good for each episode of By the Horns.
No doubt. We all entitled to our own opinions. The game is a beautiful one. And there's several players playing at a very high level. But in mentioning Zach LaVine, they talked about how that deal may involve Michael Porter Jr. and Zeke Naji. And in another group chat, I said that this is kind of like the real life version of Trading Places. And somebody was like, well, was Zach be Billy Ray Valentine? I was like,
And also, side note, Trading Places is a Christmas movie. If Die Hard can be a Christmas movie, then Trading Places is a Christmas movie. I don't know why I'm trying to make a hard left on the topics and the conversation on this By the Horns episode. But look, man, that's just how sometimes how things go. But I'm with you. I love that movie references.
'Tis the season, man. Don't get me started on this. Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I have arguments every Christmas, man.
Yeah, man.
The man went to LA for Christmas, man. It was a Christmas party he was invited to, brother. I don't know what people want, man. What they want?
Yeah. I don't know, man. Maybe they need to have one of the characters sit on Santa's lap or something like that, or have like the fake, sleigh coming on to the house. And I don't want to go too deep in Santa Claus and all that, because there's still somebody out there that is listening to the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota that believes in Santa Claus. So to each their own. I'm just going to leave it at that. But
I mean, with this report, a lot of Bulls fans may start believing in Santa Claus again. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, could possibly get something back in the form of gifts. Like you talked about Michael Porter Jr., who's rounded himself back into a all-around scorer. I'm not going to say rounded himself back into it, but rounded himself into an all-around scorer and just not a three-point specialist, which you think of Michael Porter Jr., especially with the Nuggets when they had that championship run a couple of seasons ago. 6'10", definitely can elevate. It has been healthy, right? And that was the biggest knock on Michael Porter Jr. when he entered the draft, was that, the issues that he was dealing with his back and just the severity that he was going through just to get himself to play, and just all the treatment and surgeries that he had. That's why a lot of people stayed away from Michael Porter Jr. When it came time for him to be drafted. But the Denver Nuggets saw him and saw an opportunity, and he's turned out to be one of the important pieces that their franchise has been able to bring in and help them win an NBA championship. So when you think of that and possibly coming over for a potential deal with the Chicago Bulls, you do love that. He has become a better defender as well. But getting back to Zach and what he's been able to do this season with the Bulls, and we knew this coming into the season. Even I sat down with Zach during Media Day one-on-one for the Chicago Sports Network. And before we even started the interview, his body positioning was just like, man, I'm ready to hoop. He was leaned back in his chair, kind of had a half chicken wing arm on the back of the chair. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, Zach, you just ready to hoop, aren't you? He's like, yeah. He's tired of hearing all the, speculations and the rumors, and can he return back to the all-star form that he's had previously? And he's answered that through his games that he's played so far. He's efficient. He's really efficient in terms of not forcing shots. And I think that's special with Zach this season. He's matured as a scorer and as a shot selector, because you have a guy that's shooting nearly 50, 40, 90, 43% from three, over 50% from the field, just around 80% from the free throw line. But he's understanding how to impact the game without taking these tough shots every time this Bulls team needs a bucket. So I think that's the growth of maturity in his game. And I think also you look at the injury that he has, for him, a blessing in disguise, because you can't tell me that Zach wasn't watching film while he rehabbed to get himself back for this season. You can tell in just how he plays, the conversation with Billy Donovan and the conversations with his teammates and coaching staff, that he understood how he can best impact the game with this role, with this group moving forward. And really just be honest, Drew, with the direction of this franchise. We know the direction of the franchise wants to move forward and is trending younger. I mean, you see that through Io and his growth. You see it through Kobe White, but also Matas Buzelis, the number 11 overall pick for this Bulls team, who, with Patrick Williams out, has shown signs time and time again with the more minutes that he's been given. And Billy Donovan, we discussed this on the By the Horns podcast, and he said this: he's not giving out entitlement minutes. Billy D's old school. And when you got a name like Billy D, and I'm not saying that's his nickname, but I just like to call him Billy D because, we're cut from a different cloth. Right. So he's going to make you earn those minutes. And that's what it should be when it comes to just life in general. You have to work and earn your spot, your seat at the table. So it makes it interesting to see if Zach is moved to Denver, what the Bulls could get in return, or if there are other suitors out there for Zach LaVine that are willing to take on his contract. So we'll keep our eyes on it. But again, to that report, to the Athletic that Drew mentioned, it's just something that's starting to build, right? As we move past December 15th and that trade window open, the trading deadline isn't until February. So it's a lot to unpack moving forward. And it's going to be, I'm sure, more names on this Bulls roster that will be involved in trade rumors.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm starting to get a little bit worried. Like, I feel like in the end, they'll end up being one of the bottom 10 teams in the league, and they're kind of leaving it to chance. The idea that they would be bad enough to earn, quote unquote, the sixth worst record in the league, which would have guaranteed them of keeping their pick, I think that's kind of out of the window. Some of these other teams are ahead of them. And then you have the seasons that the Pelicans and the Sixers have had that you couldn't really prepare for that. These are two teams that you expected to be in the hunt for the playoffs, if not more. So yeah, man, they're just kind of playing around with chance at this point. And I'm a little bit worried about how many more wins they may bank before they're able to trade any of these guys that they are kind of putting on the trade block.
Yeah.
But with this news that we're getting as we sit here on Tuesday, it's interesting. It's very interesting. We'll definitely keep following it and seeing where it goes.
Yeah, we definitely will keep our eyes on everything, because 2 months from now, February 17th, we can have a totally different looking Bulls team. And that's just being real about, the NBA trade deadline. Obviously, as I mentioned, the trade window is open. That passed a couple of days ago on December 15th. So we'll try and put a pin on this conversation and run it back at the trade deadline or right after the trade deadline on February 17th and just say, hey, this is nothing new. We've known these names have been involved in these trade rumors. it's not foreign to us to hear Zach LaVine or Nikola Vucevic or Ayo Dosunmu or maybe even a Kobe White being involved in potential trade rumors. And, the better you play and you're one of these teams that have a legit chance of winning an NBA championship, you try to load up. And it happens every single year. It's an arms race, and Denver's trying to do that by adding Zach LaVine to their roster. But Zach LaVine is still a Chicago Bull. Zach LaVine is still a bucket. And Zach LaVine, more importantly, is an efficient bucket. So hopefully he's able to return for this Bulls group moving forward, because to finish out the month of December, Drew, Chicago Bulls are matching up against two of the best teams, not only in the Eastern Conference, but also the NBA. The Boston Celtics, we know their resume and who they are, right? Their reputation obviously speaks for itself as a franchise, but also recently what they've been able to do going back the past few seasons and even last season, the reigning NBA champs. They get them on Thursday night and then also Saturday. So Thursday will be at TD Garden in Boston. Then they come back on Saturday at the United Center to face off against the Celtics. But then, Drew, it's like, all right, cool. However, the dust settles with those two games with this Bulls team. And even if you go back to the first meeting between the Bulls and the Celtics with the NBA Cup, Bulls played them tough.
Yeah.
Fourth quarter happened. Then maybe I should say Peyton Pritchard happened, and things changed for that team. So hopefully the game plan is a little tougher and more focused on Peyton Pritchard and everybody on that Celtics group. But after that, you have Milwaukee. You have Milwaukee. You go to Atlanta, and the Atlanta Hawks have been surprising.
They've been frisky. We've been calling them unserious, and maybe against the Bulls, they just one of those things where the Bulls kind of have their number, but they've been frisky as hell, man.
Yeah. And I had to catch myself a little bit because I'm like, damn, did Trae Young and the Hawks start listening to the Vital Horns podcast? I mean, I'm not trying to think of myself in be arrogant, oh yeah, they heard what I said, so that changed around the season. No, they've actually been doing this since I think around that time that the Bulls went down to Atlanta. We're down, I believe, 20 points in that game and came back to win that game. And that was Ayo Dosunmu having one of just those Ayo Dosunmu games, man, and changed that entire thing around. But Trae Young, what he's been doing, always been one of the top assist guys in the league. But you can see him taking a step back a little bit with this Hawks offense and this Hawks team and deferring a little bit to Jalen Johnson, who is a young, I think this is year 3 for Jalen Johnson, but just a young dude ready to get active. And he's one of the, in my opinion, and watching this Hawks team, one of the 4 dudes that they have that can really go get it on the wing, like Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, DeAndre Hunter. You mentioned that name that's involved in some trade rumors as well for the Atlanta Hawks. Even they have the number 1 overall pick in Zachary Ricochet, who's still coming along in his own way, but he's shown signs of what he can bring to that forward group for the Atlanta Hawks. So they have some pieces. Onyeka Okongwu, I got to throw that name in there as well when you think about just that forward group. So it ain't really that sweet as we thought it was with the Atlanta Hawks. So that's who the Bulls will have after they face off against the Celtics, the Bucks. They have the Hawks, and then they have the Bucks again, and then finish off the month in Charlotte against the Charlotte Hornets. So we talked about this team winning 4 of their first 6 games of the month. Drew, all hands on deck as you finish out the month of December.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And this is a team that there are, regardless of the opponent, I feel like there's a challenge every night. Sometimes the Bulls are also kind of playing themselves because of the style of basketball that they play. They're going to kind of run and gun, play at almost like one speed during the game. So sometimes they can come back and bite them if they do get up to a big lead, like we saw on Monday night where they gave up a 16-point lead that they had. They let Toronto – watch Toronto go on a 25-10 run in that fourth quarter. So, the Bulls can be their own worst enemy with the style of play that they've adopted this season. So, no easy roles, man. One thing that I am interested in seeing with these games that are coming in waves against the Celtics here on Thursday and Saturday is how does Matas Buzelis play? First time he played the Celtics, he played a little under 5 minutes. Billy Donovan didn't like what he saw out of the rookie. I think more so defensively, maybe getting lost in certain matchups. So I want to see how he comes out against the Celtics, against that same team that he had to get pulled out of the game against. What does he do? How many minutes does he get? We want to see him continue to get time out here on the court. And again, P. Will. He had some flashes Monday night. We've seen him kind of attack off the dribble in transition, either getting straight to the cup or firing out left-handed passes to the corner. Saw him get another tip dunk, a couple blocks. But he's, it's P. Will. It's kind of what we've seen from him in the past. Flashes here and there, but we're ready for something to really pop with him. Obviously, he's still kind of getting back from that injury that sidelined him for, was it about 10 games or so? So
yeah, it was about 10 games, nearly a month for P. Will with that foot injury.
His feet under him, still getting his feet under him. We'll have to see if Zach is going to be ready to play. What's going to come of Josh Giddey, who looked to turn his ankle.
Yeah.
And his reaction to it looked worse than the actual
turning
of the ankle, and that's the one that he hurt in the Olympics over in Paris. So we're gonna see, man. It's tough games all over the schedule.
Yeah, and that's why I say all hands on deck for this team moving forward, because you have a Boston team that we know loves to shoot threes, right? And so when you have that type of game, it's going to be up and down. Your rotations have to be on point. You're going to be without Josh Giddey. The Bulls, I'm sure, are going to bring him along slowly. As you mentioned, it's the same ankle that he tore ligaments in during the Olympics playing for his native country, Australia. Zach with the lower back tightness, right? Didn't play on Monday night. So how does that look against Boston? Because if you're shooting a lot of threes, one rotation, you're going to be moving different angles, having to close out, having to deal with absorbing an attacking player like a Jason Tatum or definitely a Jaylen Brown, a Derek White, a Drew Holiday. Like, those guys are bringing force if you run them off the arc. So how does that back hold up for Zach? Same thing with Patrick Williams. It's going to be tough for him with his his conditioning, and it's going to be put to the test with that. So Modest has an opportunity really to learn from that first meeting against the Boston Celtics. And what we know of Modest is he's a film nerd, which is a great thing, right? He's going to go back, and he's already gone back and look at that Celtics film to prepare him for opponents moving forward, but more so when he has that second crack at Boston. So all of my eyes will be on Modest Buzelis and how he plays. I think the only two players that I can think of that I'm not concerned about would be Ayo and Vooch. And I say Vooch because if Vooch can get the basketball, we know what Vooch can do. Yeah. And we talked about Zach LaVine's numbers and what Zach has been able to do is really, honestly, Drew, the same thing for Vooch in terms of his efficiency, not forcing shots, and just being double-double Vooch, right? And so those two dudes I'm not going to be concerned about in Boston and against the Celtics when they match up against them in the next few days, right? So we're going to face off against Boston twice in the next 3 days starting on Thursday. And then again, the road doesn't get any tougher with the Milwaukee Bucks because they're still dealing with OKC Thunder right now as we record this pod on Tuesday, December 17th. I believe it's the second half of the Bucks game. And last I checked, they were up 3 heading into halftime against OKC. So this team has turned it around. And that's why I say two of the best teams in the East and the NBA, because Milwaukee has turned things around. You're watching Giannis and Dame play in tandem and play well together, and also getting nice contributions from a lot of guys, not named Dame or Giannis. The dude AJ Green off the bench has been a blessing for that bench group for Doc Rivers. So Milwaukee is serious. They're legit again. And this is a team that's in the top 5 of the Eastern Conference right now. Of course, the Celtics are second. So your work is cut out for you. You're the Chicago Bulls. How do you finish off the calendar year? That's the big question for this team. How do they do it?
Yes, interesting month of opponents, man. You got like the top-notch guys, like you talked about with the Celtics and the Bucks, the kind of the bottom feeders and the Wizards and the Hornets. Then you got some middle-of-the-road teams that are kind of right there with the Bulls and the Hawks and the Pacers. So interesting month. I have my own opinions about what direction they should start trying to steer this thing in, but I'm not the GM. I'm not the owner, man. We just two guys sitting there talking about it.
I was about to say, man, Drew, if you transform into the GM or the owner of the Bulls, I'm like, man, let me hold $5, man. Let me get some money, man. Let me hold $20 till tomorrow, man.
You might have to do a dollar bet like Mortimer and
Randolph and Mortimer. Yeah. So that's a little tease of what we're going to get into on the By the Horns podcast before we take a small break for Christmas, as everyone will in some form or fashion if you celebrate Christmas. But if you're definitely enjoying the holidays. So we have to get into the holiday movies and Christmas movies and how they are Christmas or holiday movies and how you should recognize them as that. So definitely Trading Places for sure is at the top of the list. But look, we want to make sure that we show love because our family has expanded when it comes to the Chicago Sports Network podcast family. So we got to give a shout out to our guys, Stacey King and Mark Shanowski for the Give Me the Hot Sauce podcast. They have joined the CHSN family. You can make sure that you catch them and their episodes. And they have more coming down the pipeline for sure on the Chicago Sports Network. So you can catch them along with us and, Chuck Garfine with the White Sox podcast. Of course, our other squad is doing some great things with the Bears podcast, even though that season is, man, I don't want to even go into that conversation. But look, shout out to Stacey King, Mark Shanowski, Give Me the Hot Sauce podcast on the Chicago Sports Network. So we're looking forward to seeing more of them. And, I'm starting to, wheels are always turning. And I had this conversation with our producer, Edgar Perez, in the office earlier over at the United Center. I'm like, look, we got to get some crossover episodes going. So Stacey has to come on. Mark has to come on our show. And, of course, we go on their show and just show love, man. So we're just waiting for that podcast studio to get up and running inside the CHSN office so we can all be together and have a big show, all four of us on it, man. But that'll do it for this episode of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. Know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. For my guy, my man, Drew Stevens of the Bigs, I'm Cam Smith. We tapped into these Bulls games. We'll see how this team walks out of the dust when it settles. We'll see you soon.